Right. Okay, everybody. Well, thank you so much for being here. It is 5 o'clock on the dot where I am, so we can get started. Um, Welcome this evening to our Survivor Provider Workshop at Women's Advocates with Meg Kelly and me, Mary Beth Becker-Loth. We are here today just to talk to and about survivor providers because there are so many of us in the field of violence prevention, and we have some really unique needs that not everybody thinks about. So I'm excited to be here today. I'm really excited for Meg to be here with me, and just thrilled for everybody who showed up this evening. So let's get started. So today is going to be, we're hoping to have a conversation, just building awareness about what it means for us in this field of victim services to be survivor providers, understand how we cope with the situations that we're dealing with every day at work, and how we can foster more supportive systems at our work and outside of work. And we're also hoping that you'll leave this evening with tangible tools for navigating this work. As survivors ourselves, while working and engaging with survivors, but also prioritizing our own healing. I do want to launch a poll real quick just to see what sectors folks are coming from. We have, let's see, 31 people on the call. So if you'd like, you can fill out the poll questions to see where people are coming from. And I'll give folks a minute or so to fill that out. All right, and as the responses are coming in, I just want to remind all of us that as survivor providers, you're not alone. Sometimes in this field, we're taught to hold our own experiences as separate from the rest of the work that we're doing. And so it can kind of feel like, well, I must be the only one who is experiencing this work as a survivor who works with survivors. And that's not the case. You're not the only one. There are so many of us, and we're happy you're here. So with that being said, I'm going to end the poll. Looks like we've got a lot of human services folks and a lot of victim survivors. Wherever you are, wherever you're coming from, you're welcome here. So let's go. As I said, my name is Mary Beth. I'm the domestic violence community educator at Women's Advocates, which is a shelter and multi-service program that works with victim survivors in our community to break the cycle of domestic violence. Now let Meg introduce herself.
Yes, hello. Thank you for having me. My name is Meg or Megan, whichever one is fine. I'm a licensed mental health counselor, a podcast host, and a helper advocate. And in my practice as a therapist, I specialize in treating helpers and healers who are dealing with burnout, compassion fatigue, and vicarious trauma.
Thank you, Meg. We are all so excited. We're so excited to have Meg anytime she comes to present with us. I'm really looking forward to our conversation this evening.
Me too.
We want to start out by doing a word cloud. So this is on Mentimeter. You can scan the QR code on your screen, or go to menti.com and enter the code 18063680, and fill out a word cloud to explore what does it mean to you to be a survivor provider. I am going to share that screen as the results come in. So you can just fill in this word cloud. What does it mean to you to be a survivor who works with survivors? let those start coming in. Ooh, empowerment. I love that. Strength and resilience. Oh, they're moving so fast, I can't read them. Encouraging, trust, love, purpose. I love this. And as more people add words, the words that are being added multiple times are getting bigger. So we're seeing healing get bigger and bigger. Justice and growth. I know they're moving pretty fast, but Meg, are there any that stand out to you?
Yeah, I'm just like watching them just like fly everywhere. You're not alone, finding community. I love those things. Mutualism, I like that too.
Yeah.
They're all like overwhelmingly positive, which is really wonderful to see.
Yeah, I love that, especially because the work that we do is so hard. And it can be difficult when you're surrounded by the day-to-day struggles of your work to
Yes.
think about those positives. Amazing. Well, thank you all so much for sharing your thoughts. You can continue to share those, but we will move back to our actual presentation. Just a minute. Okay, great. So thank you all for participating in that. We wanted to start off this webinar with kind of a warm hug for survivor providers. So we wrote this little letter. Thank you for being here. The work that you do as survivor providers is really hard and really heavy, and we know that you've prioritized the needs of other people over your own healing journey, but you deserve a space to care for yourself. You have a right to your own healing and to seek your own healing. So this time until 6:15 p.m. Central is for you. So any questions, comments, impressions that you have today, feel free to share them. We want to hear from you. We want to know how we can support you, and how we can all support each other in doing this really difficult work. And we also know that if survivor providers didn't exist, we wouldn't be having this workshop today. So thank you all for showing up to the work every day, no matter how hard it is, especially when it's hard. But today is for you. And with that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mary Beth. Okay, so we wanted to start this presentation just by talking about some of the potential ways that being a survivor provider can show up in our work with other survivors. One of the big ways that I've heard and seen for myself is we have a better sense of being able to understand what survivors are experiencing. This can be a really positive aspect of the work that we do. It can sometimes be negative if it starts to walk into the territory of re-traumatizing us or bringing up our stuff within the work that we do. But overwhelmingly, we can understand to a deeper degree what people are going through. Sometimes this may mean that we don't necessarily have the space to engage in our own healing due to the needs of others, which like I love working with other therapists, and it fills my heart. And I hear so often that they will frequently prioritize the needs of others over their own. So that may be one way that this shows up for people. That may lend itself to feeling the need to be strong and responsible all of the time, and maybe even limiting some of the emotions that we allow ourselves to experience through our work. So we may push down our own experiences or try to shove it aside as we're doing the work that we're doing, which at times can be a necessary part of the work. But at other times, it may do more to harm us in the long run. And we may, going further down that line, we may have this drive to just neglect our needs in general in order to be there for other people. So I have done this myself. I've skipped lunch breaks. I have skipped going to the bathroom between sessions. I have skipped feeding myself in order to maybe start a session a couple minutes earlier or to tend to a client. So that's one of those ways that it might show up as well. And then some of us may also feel very hesitant or even fearful of asking for help due to our own survival instincts. And this may be related to our own histories of needing that independence or basically having to be independent and do everything on our own, which then ends up showing up in the work that we do.
Thank you so much, Maggie. Yeah, I have absolutely been team skip a lunch break because
yes,
other people need me more. But no, I need food to do the rest of my job.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's so easy, like for myself and for people that I work with, I see it happen. So it's kind of sneaky, right? Because it can be easy one time to say, okay, I'll schedule over my lunch break. But then like, yes, it keeps happening. And we can often get into these modes of like, well, I have to, this space is available. I could eat lunch or I could see somebody. And that in the short term is not necessarily bad. In the long term, it can create other problems for us.
Absolutely. And I think it does, like the more that we overbook and overschedule ourselves with other people's needs, the less we're able to attend to our own healing.
Mm-hmm.
And that was part of what you said in the last slide, that we are neglecting our own healing in the service of others. I wanted to show these different paths to healing from the Vital Cycles Healing Toolkit that just are different ways that each of us are walking through healing. So if you haven't taken the time ever to think about, okay, where am I really on my journey, on my path to healing, think about it now. Take some time to look at some of these different paths to healing, like surviving, using our coping skills to carry on, or discovering greater dignity as we shed unjust burdens. If any of these seem to resonate with you and you feel like, oh yeah, I'm really in a processing place in my journey right now, or I'm really interested in accepting or recharging, I would love to hear about that. Which path are you on right now? And what would you like to walk toward?
Yeah, I'm reading through this for myself too and trying to pick out some of my own.
Yeah. And some of these I'd never even considered. I'd never even considered the stabilizing or the connecting aspects of healing. We have one person in the chat saying choosing, freeing, accepting. Wonderful.
Surviving, working towards recharging and harmonizing.
Yeah.
Recharging, surviving. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not bad to be just on the surviving path. Sometimes we just need to get through the day. Sometimes really all that we can do in a day is get through it. And if that's where you are and it's keeping you alive, you keep survive all the way. But know that there is more available to you.
Yep.
Yeah. So continuing to build awareness of where we are, I'm going to launch a little self-compassion mini quiz that you can answer. This is not to shame you or, I don't know, berate you or drag you for filth. for not being good to yourself.
Yeah.
It's just a way of understanding or auditing your own sense of self-compassion. This is from the self-compassion test by Dr. Kristen Neff. And it's just a really great tool to use to think about, okay, am I being as kind to myself as I deserve? Am I giving myself the grace that I would give to other people? So answering questions like, I'm kind to myself when I'm experiencing suffering, or when times are really difficult, I tend to be tough on myself. What are you feeling? What are you going through?
Yeah.
You can answer these or not. I'll end the poll in just a couple of seconds. This was a really hard quiz for me to do when I took it, Meg.
Yeah.
I kept looking at it and thinking, oh, and I think of myself as a generally self-compassionate person. I think that I have learned to be kinder to myself. And then I took this quiz.
Right. Well, we're building awareness here. Like we can be learners for a very long time and how to be kind to ourselves. It's at least in the way that I think of it, it's a process rather than like there's an end goal and this is where I am good at self-compassion. Like it's so unique, and the journey can take a long time, to be quite honest.
Absolutely. This is
Yeah.
learning to be better to ourselves is the work of our lives. All right. So sharing some of these results, we've got, I think there's room for improvement for all of us in our levels of self-compassion. And again, this quiz was not to shame you or tell you you're being too hard on yourself. You should stop that right now. Because that is also shaming and scolding and not very compassionate.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of like almost always and about half of the time for most of these questions. So it sounds like many folks in this space here struggle with this to some degree.
Yeah. And it is hard. Somebody in the chat is saying, yeah, I need a break, but we're short-staffed. We're short-staffed, and I can't, like, I don't want to leave people hanging or neglect the staffing issues at my work, but I also need to take care of myself. Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah,
that's really real. We're all feeling that right now. But continuing to build self-awareness as people who may be survivors who work with survivors. Eventually you might come across a client or be working with somebody whose story is really similar to your own. And that can cause some triggers. It can cause some physical responses. So what is going on, or what have you noticed if you've worked with somebody whose story is very similar to yours, or who triggers some old memories in you? What's going on? What's going on up here and in your body?
Yeah. I think for me, like, I'll just kind of speak to this while people are answering in the chat. When I have encountered folks in my work who have a similar story to me, I definitely noticed this sort of like urge to give the advice that I wanted or maybe could have heard at that time that would have been right for me. That may not be right for that person. And there have been times where I've had physical reactions where I can notice, and I've gotten better over time at noticing like the fight or flight response. But I can notice some sort of energy rising where my body starts to feel more tingly, or my shoulders get more tight, or even my lungs might feel a little more tight as I'm trying to breathe. So it has shown up in a lot of different ways for me.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are in the chat are putting
Hmm.
physical responses in that pit in your
Yeah.
stomach, holding your breath. Um, Somebody who says, I feel an urge to devote more time and energy to them and become too invested in their outcome. Yeah. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, it's really hard. For me at least, when I've encountered people who've had experiences that are similar to my own, I want to I want to scoop them up and
Hmm.
carry them to somewhere better because I know that I because I'm thinking about me. I'm not
Hmm.
thinking about them. I'm thinking about me at that point in my
Hmm.
life.
Yeah.
And that's not great for either of us.
Yeah, it can, you can have that deeper empathy. And again, there are ways that that may not be the most positive thing.
Right. Yeah, somebody else in the chat is saying that their agency has the option to defer people with similar experiences to other
That's
staff
awesome.
members, and that's really helpful. We're going to talk
Mhm.
about some organizational things that programs can do to support survivor providers because
Mhm.
sometimes there are some folks who don't have that option to just send them off to another caseworker.
Mhm.
So what do you do when you're stuck with this person?
Right.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah. Okay. So we just wanted to share this quote from Prentice Hemphill. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Um, about disembodiment. So, disembodiment is an unawareness, repression, or denial of our sensations and emotions, and or privileging our thinking over our feeling. Disembodiment often leads to an incongruence between the actions that we take in the world and the beliefs that we hold. Okay. So, this is leading us into a discussion around us as survivor providers, how we may try to deal with these very difficult things, these difficult emotions or physical sensations that come up when we work with people with similar stories. And some of the ways that it may show up are in compartmentalizing and dissociating. So we have the two split out here to talk a little bit about the differences. With compartmentalizing, it's kind of akin to putting your difficult emotions or memories, thoughts, experiences, etc., into kind of like boxes in your mind, is the way that I've described it to people. Um, this is something that can happen consciously. So you may make that decision to say, okay, this memory is very difficult for me, and I'm just going to put it over here. We're going to close that box in my mind and not deal with it right now. This may also be something that happens subconsciously. So when a difficult sensation or memory comes up, your brain may automatically just put that in its little box. Um, this can be helpful to us in a lot of different ways because it can allow us to attend separately to these various emotional and mental demands that we have throughout the day. So it can help us when we're doing our job to not become so overwhelmed by all of the different boxes and everything contained within them. They're kept in those spaces. Um, but it can be unhelpful at times if it creates more of an emotional disconnection or a dissonance between our actions and values, which is what that previous quote was kind of alluding to. Another way that this may show up is with dissociating, which is, it's actually a very common experience. Daydreaming is a type of dissociation, but it may go into the realm of like a dissociative disorder, which is more related to, a history of trauma. And that more severe dissociation, as you might see with dissociative identity disorder, things of that nature, are typically more signs of trauma. So dissociation itself, it can get kind of a bad rap, but it is actually, in a lot of ways, a very helpful part of our body systems of keeping us safe. Um, Especially when we are going through a traumatic event or re-experiencing something that is traumatizing. the dissociation can help keep us from experiencing or re-experiencing a real or perceived pain or danger. So it can have the effect of taking us sort of out of ourselves so that we're not as present for the pain that is coming to us. The ways that this can be unhelpful is when dissociation leads to depersonalization or derealization, which is, like a low recognition of yourself or your surroundings. Things may not feel real. It can also lead to some inability to remember recent or distant events.
And it shows up in our bodies, right? Like
Mhm.
that we
Yes.
can feel it, even if we're not really all there when we're dissociating. Our body knows that we're
Mhm.
dissociating.
Oh, yeah.
So just we'd like you to think about when you're compartmentalizing or dissociating, what are you physically feeling, and where? So I've got some I've got some examples here too. So just be
Mhm.
thinking about and maybe sharing with the chat what and where are you feeling when you're compartmentalizing or dissociating. Um, I know for a lot of folks, chronic migraines are really big in the survivor provider community,
Mhm.
as well as that tense shoulders. I know that when I am really stressed or trying to compartmentalize, my shoulders just live. They pay rent to my ears, basically. They're just up
Yeah.
here all the time,
Mhm.
and that's how I know that I'm experiencing something.
Mhm.
Um, Yep,
Yeah.
stomach upset. I would be very interested to see the number of survivor providers with IBS.
Mhm.
Um, yep,
Mhm.
headaches, negative self talk, blurry vision.
Yep.
Yeah,
Neck pain, shoulder pain. Yep.
absolutely. And that inability to be still, that like, oh, I'm tapping my foot, or I'm chewing on my pencil end, or I'm picking at my cuticles. Um,
Mhm.
all of those.
Yeah, I know
Absolutely.
that I've been a nail biter for most of my life, and it was
Yeah.
only in my adulthood that I was able to, yeah, Laura as well, nail biting. I was finally able to recognize that as like my form of like dissociative stress just coming out. I was like, I didn't even notice I was doing it.
Yeah. My Yep, tapping your foot, chewing your lip. Yeah, my cuticles are a mess. Because when I'm trying not to think about something, I'm constantly moving my hands,
Yeah.
um,
Yep.
messing with my cuticles.
I hear you.
Hand sanitizer is really hard for me because of that.
Because
Yeah,
it's always
careful.
stinging. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, just be thinking about that. It does, your body knows.
Mm.
Basically, bottom line is your body knows when you're not in it or you don't want to be in it. Um,
Yes. And so that leads us into now the discussion around embodiment, which another quote from Prentice Hemphill. Embodiment is the awareness of our body's sensations, habits, and the beliefs that inform them. Embodiment requires the ability to feel and allow the body's emotions. This embodied awareness is necessary to realign what we do with what we believe. Right.
we do have
Yes.
ways to build that.
We do. And this is a like a high level overview. And so this is definitely something that we would encourage you to explore either in your own therapy or your communities of support, journaling, whatever it needs to be. The first one that we would like to offer to you is self-acceptance, which is it's kind of a buzzword, but it's really important to have some radical acceptance of where you are yourself in this current moment, being in the present moment rather than in the past or in the future. Um, being able to know and recognize that your journey is unique to you and that your needs are going to be unique as well. This doesn't mean ignoring any of the difficult parts, and it also does not mean minimizing the positives that you experience. The second thing that we'd like to offer is emotional attunement. So this can be checking in with your body and your mind throughout the day. What are the cues that you have physically and emotionally that will help you better understand your experience? So in the chat, just a couple minutes ago, we talked about those physical and mental signs that you may be disembodied. Those are the things that you want to start paying attention to so that you can gently draw your attention there and increase that attunement. We'd also ask you to consider, what do you notice within yourself when you slow down? And then the third thing that we'd like to offer is practicing your values. So identify the values that you carry with yourself as a provider survivor, write them down, big or small, doesn't matter. And try to find the ways in your daily life that you can honor those values in the work that you're doing with the people that you serve.
Absolutely. And these aren't meant to be a to-do list that you have to cross off
Right.
all at once. It's
Mhm.
on your own time, at your own pace.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But when you are embodied, how can we how does your body feel when you're in it, when you're engaging in those more connective activities, or when you feel particularly attuned? What does that mean, and where? We have some examples here too. So like putting if your shoulders are up by your ears, maybe when you feel a little bit better or more inside of yourself, they come back down. Um, we've got those deep, calm belly breaths
Mhm.
that really bring us back into our bodies.
Yeah. Jennifer shared calm. Yeah. So write in the chat how you tend to feel emotionally or physically or mentally, or what do you do differently when you are more embodied?
More focused.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Focused, creative self-talk, like that. Yeah.
It's
I'm
harder to
noticing.
think about.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm noticing that these are coming in a little more slowly, which is fine. Feel lighter and more willing to pursue things I like. I like that. Yeah, so it's, you notice a difference. Creativity, yes. And I love that people are bringing up creativity, because that, like, being creative and playful and engaging in things that are relaxing and fun is one of those big signs that you are more embodied and present in the moment. Is when you can play and laugh.
Yeah. Yeah, lighter and hopeful. Yeah. I always
Mhm.
feel like when I'm disembodied or when I'm compartmentalizing, I'm feeling inertia, like I'm stuck.
Mhm.
And it's harder to get out of it. But
Mhm.
embodiment feels like momentum for me. I feel able to get more done or do more, or I even want to do things.
Mhm.
Whereas when I'm disembodied, I could just sit on the couch and stare at the wall for a couple hours
Oh yeah,
and not want
absolutely.
to do
Just turn
anything
those lights
different.
down. Yeah, just kind of
Yeah.
zoning out for sure.
Yeah. Feeling free.
Free.
Love that. And so yeah, we're just asking you to think about the difference, the physical difference between feeling embodied and feeling disembodied. But um, another part of this time together is we're survivor providers, which means that we have a history of trauma. Um, and so when we're at work, working with survivors, we might be thinking about how do we share our own stories, especially with coworkers or with supervisors. So I would love for folks to write in the chat whether they disclose at work that they are a survivor, how you might have come to that decision to disclose, or if you are not, if you're not open about your experience at work, why not? Either way is fine. Obviously, you don't have to share anything with anybody if you don't want to. But when we are thinking about sharing with, particularly with coworkers or supervisors, there are a couple of things to keep in mind, like why do I want to share in the first place? Is it going to be helpful for me, for other people? Trust is a really big one for me. If I am deciding to share or not, do I trust this person to hold my story? And sometimes the answer is no, and you just keep it in for a little while. What are you hoping for when you do disclose? Like someone says, I only disclose if I feel it will be beneficial. Yeah, so what does that mean for you? What are you hoping to get out of your disclosure? And then how much information are you comfortable sharing with your coworkers, with your supervisors? I'm just reading through the chat. Someone who's worked in the field for a long time, who used to be more open about survivorship, but not so much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of folks who are only disclosing just to make sure that coworkers and supervisors know or understand if they're having a trigger response.
Yeah,
that makes sense. And I also, it's different to share your story with coworkers than it is to share with survivors you support in a professional capacity. So I know not everybody discloses to clients either, because there are professional boundaries there. And when you're working with other survivors, it's not about you, it's about the survivor. So again, you're thinking, how much information am I comfortable sharing with this client? Is my disclosure going to help this person? Or is it just going to be something they have to worry about me for?
right.
And also, do you even want this person to know? If you don't want this person to have that information, you're not obliged to share it with them. But I'm very curious to hear whether your programs have policies in place regarding personal disclosure to clients, or what sort of guidance you've been given either from your organization's leadership or written in policy, or just stuff you've learned from mentors along the way about disclosure, because I think it's very different for different people, whether they are open with the clients they're working with or not.
Yeah. I know for myself as a mental health provider, a lot of the training does state, self-disclosure is something you want to be careful with. I've had mentors and supervisors along the way who have swayed more in the direction of being more closed and then swung in the direction of being more open. I feel like for myself, I take the stance of in session with clients, I don't make it about me. If there's something that my disclosure would help them, either in normalizing or helping them feel less alone, that's the stance that I take. And there's also stuff for me that I don't want or need people to know about me in order for the work to be effective. So, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, someone else in the chat is sharing that disclosing can help normalize for people, but obviously not all the time.
Right.
I know I have gotten a lot of questions when I worked on the crisis line at Women's Advocates. I would get a lot of people asking, well, have you gone through this? Have you experienced this thing? And it's always hard because it's over the phone. I can't necessarily, I don't have the relationship yet with this person that I would
Mhm.
feel comfortable disclosing. But I've always gotten more of an open-ended, well, a lot of us get into this work because we've been through it.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
which is like a very middle ground way
It
to
is.
say absolutely nothing, um, while
Mhm.
also saying, yes, me too.
Yes, and there's a very strong all caps yes in the chat to that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it is a
Mhm.
slippery slope of letting people know that they're not alone, but also how much, when you do disclose, does it make the
Mhm.
conversation about you, when it shouldn't be. Um, yeah, we are asked to think about so much
Mhm.
that a
We
lot
really
of
are.
people don't have to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point in the webinar, we wanted to offer up some simple in the moment regulatory tools. I have to apologize in advance. There's a train coming. I live 2 blocks from a train track, so we'll just have the lovely background noise. Okay, so for the first one that we want to offer, we have 4-7-8 breathing. That would be inhale to the count of 4, hold your breath to the count of 7, and then exhale to the count of 8. So that's something that you can do right in the moment to send a signal to your body that it is, in fact, safe. This could be something that you use if you're feeling emotionally or physically triggered by a survivor's story and you want to be able to remain present with them. Non-doing, I love this. It's basically what it sounds like, is just giving yourself space to not do things, to not feel the need to always be productive, always on top of your game, just allowing even 5 minutes a day where you can simply be and not do. Um, Bio breaks, super important. I like to tell my clients, like, don't put your body into crisis just to like answer an email sooner or get to a session 2 minutes sooner. Like, take care of your immediate physical needs. That's going to help you stay in the moment. I mean, I know for myself, like, I've been in sessions where my stomach is grumbling so loud because I didn't even take a minute to eat something, and it's super distracting. Um, the the other one that we want to offer is connect. So if you come out of a really difficult session or meeting with a survivor, trying to find somebody else within your environment, whether that's a supervisor, an admin, a colleague, a friend, if you want to call somebody, just reconnect to a person who feels safe to you, even if it's just for a couple minutes. Say, hey, I had this really difficult interaction. I just need to connect with somebody. And then the last one that you can try and use in the moment is grounding. Um, there's some really, really simple ways that you can do this. One thing that I like to talk to my clients about is putting both of your feet on the floor and just focusing on how your feet feel in the socks that you're wearing, or the shoes, if you're wearing shoes or socks. There's also the 5 senses. So noticing all 5 senses and naming out loud what you can see, what you can smell, what you can touch. So really bringing yourself directly back into the present moment by using, your physical body to do that.
And these regulatory tools feed right into the next part of this webinar, which is
Mm-hmm.
coping mechanisms. So we are often asked to do too much, too fast. Our job can be all consuming, and sometimes there is a part of our work that we personally dread. So what are we doing to get through the day, and what might we want to do instead? I am offering a couple of situations for your perusal or consideration, about to think about, what would you do in this situation, or if something has happened to you very similar to these, what did you do? Um, we have a little activity after this, but the situations, the first one is your supervisor's been calling and texting you after work, sometimes very late into the night, to ask questions about the workday, and you feel obligated to answer her calls, even though you're not at work. You're starting to get overwhelmed. The second situation is that you're meeting with a new client for the first time and they start asking about your dating life, whether you've been on dates recently, whether those dates have ended in sex, getting really invasive in their questioning. So you end the meeting early out of discomfort, but you're later reprimanded for doing so. And then the final situation is one where one of your coworkers is out on extended sick leave. And instead of hiring a temp replacement, management has decided that you personally will take on your coworker's caseload in addition to your own clients with no extra compensation or extra time. So be thinking about those in these situations. What have you done? What might you do? What do you want to do instead? And for the first situation, our usual response could be answer the text, complain about it all of the time, and then silently resent your supervisor. Some of these usual responses might not be very helpful. You might have a desired response that you would want to use instead. Yeah, for people answering situation one, if it's not an emergency, you get back to the person when you're back in the office. It is tricky when you're salaried, so you do kind of work a lot after hours. Yep, even if I self-talk saying that I don't have to answer this person, I end up texting back anyway because I won't be able to get it out of my head. Yeah, that's real. It does start eating up your life. Mm-hmm. I know some folks, if they've experienced a lack of support from management with a boundary crossing client, they might just take it and continue to let that client make them uncomfortable. Continue to have these uncomfortable interactions and continue to feel really upset that they're not being supported. Mm-hmm. But yep, that's important to document the situation in the chat. We have somebody saying documentation. Mm-hmm. letting the supervisor know. Absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, and then for folks, I love everybody's experienced these. Or a lot of people have experienced these in the chat. I'm finding I was worried that maybe people these weren't realistic, but unfortunately they are.
Yes, they very much are. Yeah. And actually, Haley shared in the chat, number 3 has happened to me multiple times. I always just toughed it out because the rest of the team was doing it. And I got pushback from folks when I talked about advocating for myself. I asked an HR rep for an increase in pay and was asked, but what about your coworker? Doesn't she deserve a pay raise? So yes, I was going to say that's the response. Yes, both of you do. But how frustrating, right? To like advocate for yourself and approach these people and say, this is actually too much. And to be met with that response. So like, even within that, that's one example of how these things can feel difficult, but also Haley, like, that's awesome for you for advocating for yourself. Like that is moving in the direction of being your own advocate, which is really cool. But yeah, I'm sorry that happened too. That feels really uncomfortable.
And I think a lot of folks, like as survivor providers, like our ability to do a good job and to do really good work is so important to us, to be really good at what we do. And I think there are organizations out there that really take advantage of that. and say, okay, well, don't you want to be a good advocate? Good advocates work 75 hours a week and never sleep and always answer all of their calls.
Mhm.
And that exploitation is really difficult, because you want to do a good job for the people that you're working with, but you have to be alive and able to do that.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to
that's
take care of your human needs.
yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So here we can talk just a little bit about examples of setting boundaries in the workplace. So of course, this is non-exhaustive. It will be unique to you, but these are some of the ones that we thought of as we were creating this presentation. So some examples of setting boundaries might be referring out a certain type of case or client that you anticipate prompting a trauma response for you, which somebody shared earlier. I think their agency has a policy around this, that you're able to do that if you know that a certain type of case or client is going to bring up a lot of stuff for you. Another way of doing this is establishing clear expectations with leadership around your availability as a provider. So, within the scope of your job and the expected work hours, if you're expected to work 8 to 4:30, making it clear to them, like, those are the hours I will be here. If I'm not on call, X, Y, and Z, that's when I will be available. Um, Saying no to extra tasks or responsibilities that you can't reasonably accomplish. Um, I'm guilty of this. I used to do this a lot, taking on stuff just like, yes, give it all to me. I can do it. I can do it. Couldn't reasonably accomplish all of it within the given timelines. So that's been a process for me in being able to say, no, I can't do this. I can't take this client. I can't do this extra group, for example. Um, Having regularly scheduled times throughout the workday to engage with your grounding exercises or movement. This is the same as those bio breaks, getting food, going to the bathroom, getting water, moving. Sometimes, and I found this for myself too, like actually blocking out 15-minute increments within my schedule to say, okay, this is where I go take care of myself. Okay, here's where I go, and laying it out for yourself. Um, Not taking calls, texts, or emails once you're done for the day or week. Obviously, if you have an on-call type of situation, this one's a little more difficult. However, if you don't work an on-call type of position, this is one of those areas where you can start to explore what it would look like and feel like to set maybe a little bit more of a boundary around answering calls and texts. Maybe you cut it off at 10 p.m. instead of 11 p.m., whatever the case may be. And then not scheduling yourself during designated break times, i.e., not taking on a session during your lunch hour, during another break time, during admin time, right? Like if you have to write out notes, don't schedule during your note time. You need that time to do your job.
And it's so hard. It's easy for us to say these are
Yeah.
boundaries that you can set, and it is another beast entirely
Oh,
to
yeah.
actually set them.
Oh, yeah.
Um, it's so scary. Setting boundaries is so scary. When I started doing that, I noticed like a fight or flight response
Yeah.
almost when I tried to assert boundaries,
Mhm.
because I had never done it before. I didn't think it was possible. But if you're on this webinar, you deserve to set these boundaries.
Yes.
If you want them, you deserve to assert them. You are worth
Mhm.
it.
So we have more examples, and this is going more along the lines of like actual things that you could say
Mhm.
to somebody. And of course, when I do this with my clients, talking about scripts, the caveat is like make it sound like yourself. These are our words, so take what you need, leave the rest. Some examples might be, I'm not comfortable talking about that subject. I'm not available to talk about that or complete that task. One of my favorites, I cannot take on a new client without compromising the quality of care for my current clients, which I'm not willing to do. I'm unable to work during my unpaid lunch hour. I'm no longer accepting phone calls, text messages, or emails when I'm not scheduled to work or be on call. I need time to process and debrief after the session I just had. When are you available to talk? And my time off is not negotiable. I'm happy to talk about helping to find coverage for when I'm away. So we would like to hear from you folks. Write in the chat, which, if any of these boundaries resonate with you the most, either as something that you would want to do, or maybe even on the opposite, like that would feel really hard to do for me. I want it, but I don't know how.
You know, asking for time to process and debrief a particular situation is important. It's so important, especially if you are, if that particular session or client is really bringing up some triggers or trauma for you, or if something went not as well as it could have gone and you just want to talk things out with somebody, it's really important to feel able to ask, hey, can I run this by you? Can we talk about what we might do next time? And sometimes it's hard to ask, but I'm guilty of not doing any of these. Someone says, that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. Something I want to do and need to be better at is being unable to doing work during my lunch hour. Yeah. That seems to be a theme, like the lunch hour. It's so easy to schedule over that. I get it.
And it is hard in a shelter, especially because, like, if you're there, depending on the structure of the building, if you're in the office and somebody who's staying in shelter walks by and sees you, and sure, I can meet. No, you're halfway through your mac and cheese. Finish it up. Finish it. It's really hard to not just want to jump up and go right away to attend to this person's needs, but don't eat cold food. Just eat your food. Somebody who says, I once learned in a training that when I say no to someone else, I say yes to myself. I love that. We want to give you a permission slip to do all of these things, to assert your boundaries. So if you need one, if you feel like you need outside permission to do any of this, we're giving it to you now. This is your permission slip to say no without guilt, to be treated with respect, to make sure that your needs are as important as others. They are. So believe that. We are giving you permission to be accepting of your mistakes and failures, to not meet other people's unreasonable expectations of you, and let go of the need to maintain the peace or the need to feel or be responsible for other people. So all this and more, you are allowed.
Yes. Okay. So we know that this is a lot of individually focused stuff. So we did want to bring up the topic of organizational and preventative considerations, because organizations and employers can be part of the solution as well, which is what we really like to advocate for. So here are some overview considerations for organizations. Within your organization, it would be fantastic if your leadership is trained in trauma-informed organizational practices. So making sure that leadership knows how to approach people, their workers, staff, clinicians, and clients in a trauma-informed way. If your organization can promote systems and cultures that allow providers to truly disconnect from work when they're not there. I know that this one is a tough area and it is difficult. We get that. But we would encourage organizations to try to get creative with this. How can you create systems and cultures that give your workers the opportunity to disconnect so that they can rejuvenate and come back and do the work that they love to do? Policies should clearly outline acceptable behaviors from those people who are receiving support from your organization. So we talked about this a little bit in those examples, right? Like if a client who comes in and just makes you feel really uncomfortable, how does your organization handle that to center the provider and their needs while considering the needs of the person receiving support? How can you do that again in a trauma-informed way so that the provider is not walking out of your workplace feeling like gross and unsupported? And so that the person receiving support can understand what's acceptable when it comes to interacting with your staff. And then the last one is investing in resources that promote safety. This is big, especially in physical spaces, emergency phones, extra staff, call buttons within the rooms. Like, what can you do to enhance the environment to make sure that your providers feel safe when they're working with your clients?
Absolutely. And in regard to supporting providers, we have a question in the chat about saying something that comes up with running a hotline is callers who become verbally abusive or hostile on the phone. We're told to cut these off. It's hard to do that. So any suggestions on dealing with hostile callers? And oh man, I spent 3 years on the crisis hotline at Women's Advocates, and I've heard some really difficult things, and most of them are not like survivor stories. Not a problem for me, but sometimes you do get a caller who's just there to yell at you, and it is, yes. Somebody says if you continue to scream and swear, I will hang up. I think providing a warning before you end that sort of call is really great, because if you just hang up, they're probably going to call back and say, well, you hung up on me, so I'm going to berate you some more. Sometimes if you do say, I'm going to hang up now, they call back again. I used to think I wasn't allowed to hang up the phone. So I would get screamed at for about 15 minutes, and then they would hang up and I would cry. And then I would wait for the next call to come in. But over time, I got very comfortable saying, if you continue to speak to me like that, I am hanging up the phone. It's easier to do that when there's more than one of you working the crisis line at the same time. You can sort of send the person to the next advocate who's answering the call, and they can do all that again. But that is a really hard situation. Some folks are told to end the call immediately and then don't answer the call if they get a repeat number, and then screen them out of the program. Yeah, you can block calls. You are allowed to block numbers on your line. If you need to do that, you can. Absolutely. There's a certain, you don't have to be available to people who are going to just verbally abuse you. So that's my suggestion for that situation.
Yes, and I love the addition to that is the way it is explained here is we are here to help survivors of abuse, but it does not mean that we are allowed to be subject of abuse, which is a wonderful way to say that. Like, yes, we're helping people who have been abused, but that does not mean we get to be abused in that process. Yeah. Okay, so we have a slide here about what those in leadership can do to support survivor providers. So again, we would like to encourage, if you have the resources, try to find the resources to provide frequent opportunities for debriefing and grounding, especially if you have people who are doing a lot of one-to-one work, who are really down in the weeds, giving them an opportunity to let some of that out after those meetings can be really helpful. We would strongly encourage you to really, really listen to and incorporate the feedback from survivor providers regarding safety, policies, job responsibilities, and more. So if it's accessible to your organization, really try to bring the providers into the discussions around the way that the business is run. Obviously, they're not going to get their fingers in everything, but the things that directly impact their work, we would encourage you to invite them into those conversations. Creating frequent opportunities for providers to receive supervision, support, or temporary relief from their duties. So supervision is similar to the debriefing and grounding, but it can be more solutions focused or reflective. But really, again, like providing people with the space to release some of the energy and the emotion that comes with doing this very heavy work. And even up to giving them some temporary relief, like give them, if they're asking for a mental health day, making that a policy within your program. Yes, we provide that to people who need that. Investing in resources and policies that promote radical self-care for providers. This goes along those same lines of supervision, debriefing, grounding, but also like, what is your organization doing to proactively encourage people to radically take care of themselves? And then, of course, providing compensation that is commensurate with the work provided and the expectations. So we want to make sure that as part of the care for providers, they are financially taken care of in a way that allows them to not have some of that stress on their shoulders as they were working with vulnerable populations.
Absolutely. And so if you are organizational leadership on this webinar, these are things that you can do. And a lot of times you already have the information you need available to you to do these things and figure out how to support your staff. Go back through your records, go back through 5 years ago when you had this conversation the first time about how are we supporting our advocates. Go back through those notes. I don't think a lot has probably changed. You don't need to reinvent the wheel, but you do need to listen to the people who are providing
Yeah.
these services.
Yeah. It's kind of like a lot of this it's simple. Finding the solutions may not be easy, but it's worth the challenge in really finding ways to incorporate this type of support into your organization, because it's going to make it a really wonderful place to work, and your providers are going to feel supported and heard and validated, right? Which is a very trauma-informed practice. So, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And we want to offer up to all of you here in this webinar some affirmations. My story matters. I am allowed to prioritize my own healing. Asking for help is a demonstration of my growth and my strength. I am allowed to feel all of my emotions unapologetically, and I need space too.
We are getting a couple of questions about whether this information is going to be accessible to you after the presentation. And yes, it is. You are going to get an email after the presentation with all of the PowerPoint slides and all of this good information. We also have a whole bunch of resources available to you on this page. We are really, really big fans of the book Burnout, The Secret to Unlocking the Stress Cycle. We're also huge fans of the book The Body Keeps the Score. We were talking about embodiment and disembodiment and trauma earlier. And if you want to learn a whole bunch more about that, you can read The Body Keeps the Score. Trauma Stewardship is a great book too. You have access to the SelfCompassion Quiz, to Meg's Instagram account, Anti-Work Therapist. And Meg, do you want to talk about your podcast?
Sure. Yes. So I, in what was it, July of 2021, I started a podcast after experiencing a lot of burnout and a little bit of compassion fatigue, financial distress, the works. Um, and so I started a podcast called Mental Status, which it's all about burnout. It's geared primarily toward mental health workers. However, I found that the topics that we explore in it apply to most people who are in helping professions. So I have friends who are nurses who have listened and said that it's helped them, people who are holistic healers, advocates, therapists, social workers. And primarily what I do is I get on a Zoom call with people and we chat about burnout, and we talk about how it affects us and the systemic reasons for that, the personal reasons for that. We talk about resiliency. Yes, it's available on all major platforms. So it's called Mental Status, and it's on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, Google. It's in places you can find it. um, and kind of an offshoot of that is an Instagram account that I created called the Anti-Work Therapist, where I like to be a fierce advocate for helpers, and kind of talk about the rights that you have as a worker and as a therapist, and the ways that you can show up for yourself in this work. So I hope to see you there.
Thank you all so much for being here this evening. Thank you to our interpreters, Quincy and Nina. And thank you so much, Meg, for doing this with me. It's such a pleasure talking to you and talking with you. This is the first time that Meg and I have presented together, but I'm sure it will not be the last.
Yeah, I hope not. This is great.
But thank you all so much for coming. You can download a copy of the PowerPoint slides now by scanning this fancy QR code, or you can wait until the post-webinar email is mailed out either tonight or later tomorrow. So if you want it now, you can get it now. But if you're into delayed gratification, you can wait till the email comes.
Yes, practice some of that grounding. Just really like be in the present moment.
Absolutely. But thank you all so much.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful evening. And take care of yourselves. Please, you deserve it. You are worth all of the care and love and service that you give to other people and that you're paid to give to other people. So please turn some of that inward because you deserve it.
You do.